Hello everyone, and welcome to the channel. And if you're new here, welcome. And if you're a returning visitor, welcome back. If you like this kind of content, please like, share, and subscribe. And also, please leave a comment. I would like to know what you think. Now let's begin. So this was some years ago. This was right before I met my second husband, whom I'm still with now, of course. And I started visiting this church that was ran out of a community center, and this happened in Washington State. I'm not going to say the name of the bishop or the city, just the state. And it was a female pastor. Well, she called herself a bishop. Let's just call her Gayla. It doesn't sound nothing like her name. It's just a made-up name or name I just kind of came up with. So we'll call her Bishop Gayla or Pastor Gayla. For the sake of the video, we'll just call her Pastor Gayla. Pastor Gayla ran this church out of a community center, and she used to prophesy over people and stuff like that, and she actually helped me out too a little bit, and helped me see things the way I needed to see them, just as a life as a young Christian. And I do really appreciate her for that. One of the things that she caught about me is at the time I really didn't believe, like I had issues with believing. And I think I always believed in Christ, like since I got saved, but maybe there was a part of me that had issues with beliefs. Until she pointed that out, I never even knew I had that issue. So thank God for her being there for that. She did do some good, a big good in my life with that one. But one of the things that I noticed about her running this church out of the community center is she did this particular thing. I won't say what that was, but she did this particular thing that I thought was wrong in the church. And I never said nothing to her directly about it, but me and her sister were so-called friends, right? If you want to call that a friend. And her sister, I didn't know her sister was two-faced. So I just kind of discussed it with her sister and said, well, I don't think, Pastor Gayla should be doing that. I'm not sure why she's doing that. And I was explaining that to her because I had invited someone to the church, and I had to explain to this person, hey, when you get to this church, this pastor does this, that, and the third. It was really one thing, and just know that this is just one of the things that this pastor do. I knew it was questionable, but I was telling him, other than that, I like this pastor, and I invited this person to the church, and the person understood, so they wasn't taken aback by it when they saw it. So her sister went back and told her everything that I said, which I didn't think she was going to do that. I was just kind of confiding in her, and I thought we were friends. So next thing I know, I come to church again, I think for a second time with the same person. And instead of her pulling me to the side, because you got to understand, this was a private conversation. I didn't go blast this to everybody in the church. I only talked one-on-one with her sister over the phone. So she's at the pulpit, and I think they call this pulpit bashing. And she called herself checking me from the pulpit. Now, this was a very small church. It wasn't hard for people to figure out who she was talking about, especially when I got up and walked out. So then it was quite obvious. So it was a while before I went back to that church, but I noticed that this pastor never really got over that, never talked to me one-on-one, but I still liked her church, but it was like that was the one thing she just never got over. And of course, I knew I couldn't trust her sister no more, about my concerns. Because I wasn't bad-mouthing this pastor. I was just telling her that this was, this is something I was concerned about, but never told her, hey, go back and say something to your sister, because her sister, Pastor Gayla, had kind of a strong personality, and I don't think she could take that kind of criticism. And with the way this story went, it's kind of obvious. So every now and then I would still come by and visit the church. But like I said, it seemed like this pastor was just never really over it. Some services she would just leave me alone. Other services she would kind of bash me or talk bad about me without actually saying my name. And I began to notice a pattern. I noticed that, okay, so this particular pastor would have like health issues. Like every time I went to that church, and it wasn't like every Sunday on a continuous basis, but every time I went to that church, I would notice that like the day after, like that Monday, she would get sick and would end up in the hospital. She would have some type of emergency. And after a few times of this happening, and it always seemed to happen whenever I visited and when she would mess with me from the pulpit. And I began to notice a pattern, and I think that was the first time I began to really notice. I don't even know if I really fully noticed it, but that's the first time I think I began to see that there was a consequence to doing harm to me. I left that church for a while, and it wasn't because I was concerned about what was happening to the pastor. I think it was because I was tired of being picked on. And so I just moved along for a while. Finally, when I met my husband, my second husband, um, I, made my rounds, took him to different churches and let him meet people that, I knew and stuff like that. And just kind of just, I was just happy and blessed and, hey, look how God has blessed my life. It was just kind of like that sort of situation. And I was just so happy. And I brought my new husband to this church, and my husband's a very, very wise man. I'm not saying he's perfect, but he's wise in my opinion. And so at this time, my husband spotted some things about this pastor, I guess that didn't sit well with him. And my husband is not the type of person that would really try to pick my friends or controlling or anything like that. He really isn't that type. He's really a really nice, easygoing guy, unless you interfering with something that he believes, or that he has strong convictions about. So, but there was something about this particular pastor that he didn't really like, and he didn't seem to express that he disliked her personally, like in a vicious way. But he saw something, and he was like, "Hey, I don't want you going to that church anymore." And I didn't like that, but I obeyed, and I'm glad I did, because there was another guy and his wife that started attending that church, and make a long story short on that, he ended up losing his wife. I think she got so caught up with this pastor that um, it was just like she started rebelling against her own husband. I don't know the full story on that. I just know that their marriage didn't last, and I believe it was due to that church. And so my husband had told me, and we were newlyweds. He told me, "No, I don't want you going to church anymore." I was like, "Okay." I went ahead and obeyed. I knew the importance of being obedient, and I knew he wasn't doing it for some mean, selfish, ungodly reason. I felt what he was saying, so I was like, "Okay." I obeyed, and guess what? I saved my marriage. And one other person was kind of speaking to me on that, like, "Hey, you keep going there, you won't have your marriage anymore." And I'm like, they were seeing something that I guess I wasn't seeing. So I left that church, and I don't know, I don't think I ever went back. No, I never went back. And me and my husband are still together to this day, as I already mentioned earlier. So the moral of the story is, you know, if you're a pastor or a bishop and you're running a ministry, you can't do things like pulpit bashing and take your anger out on people or getting back at somebody. Because I'm telling you, Like I said in my previous video, you don't know what that person calling is. You don't know how God feels about that person. And just in general, God is protective, very protective over his children, over his saints, over those who serve him, over those who love him. And so this particular pastor had to learn this the hard way. And I found out some years later that through her sister that her church finally closed down. And so, and then me and the sister had ended up falling out. And I'll probably speak on that story later. I would say that one hasn't concluded yet. So there's some stuff that I'm still waiting, for like the end result of or how God is going to deal with it or something like that. But yeah, me and her sister aren't friends anymore either. But that's my time, you guys. That's my video. Um, if you like what you heard or can learn something from it, leave a comment. I'd like to know what you think. All right. Have a great day.